Hi, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Mental Fitness Unscripted podcast, where our conversation will encourage your healthy living journey. Inspired by our Team Quadzilla coaching motto, Healthy Living Starts Between Your Ears, we talk about mental fitness in ways that challenge us to think about our thinking regarding topics like habits, leadership, exercise, values, marriage, parenting, and faith. Our hope with this podcast is to sharpen you as we sharpen ourselves to be all we were made to be. So let's dive right into the conversation on this episode of Mental Fitness Unscripted. For sure.
Well, you've got a really cool subject, I think. Let's give this a shot. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. This is, firstly, this is not my idea. Some of my inspiration comes from other resources, podcasts that I listen or things I'm reading or whatever. But um, the big idea is that I think especially for men and men like me who have a tendency towards people pleasing or performing. And I don't want to get to all of what that means, but if you're the type of person who feels like um, your confidence and esteem is built when you believe that other people think highly of you, well, then that's what I call a performer. There's a lot of problems with that, and I'm working through some of that for myself. But an idea that came up regarding this kind of thinking is the difference between being nice and being good. And so, of course, words matter, so we need to be careful to define what exactly we're talking about. And the best example that I can come up with to describe this is Jesus. Now, whether you are a Jesus follower or not, it's pretty easy for you to agree that Jesus was a real living person on earth. There are basically no argument that he is a historical figure that actually lived. Okay, so part of his story that we know is that he is both nice and good according to the time and the situation, but there is a difference. So, for example, when Jesus famously washed the feet of his followers or his closest disciples, we might all naturally assume that that was being nice, right? That's a generous and a very kind thing to do. But Jesus, the same guy, also carried a whip into the temple courts and cast out all the money changers and the vendors who were selling in God's holy place, creating quite a stir. That might not be considered being very nice. Okay, so same guy, two different events. One is considered nice, one is not nice. However, they are both good because they are rooted in truth and conviction about how we are to live and behave and operate. So I think for bringing this back to my experience, I think I get a confusion about focusing too much on being the nice guy instead of being a good guy, because sometimes the good guy might be a wee bit offensive to some. So that's kind of like baseline foundation of where I was headed today and what I thought we might talk about. So what do you think off the top of your head here of that first intro?
I thought of more than three things, so I've got to write a note here.
Okay.
I can remember three, sometimes definitely two. I appreciate you defining that. I need to close my door. Hang on a sec. I appreciate you bringing that up and sharing your experience because, we get really focused on definitions here.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that the right words paint pictures, and so the right image, the right vision of what we're saying. I need you to understand how I'm seeing the word nice,
Mm,
or I need you
yeah.
to see how I'm seeing the word good, because they can be very two different um, images in our minds. And if
Yeah.
we don't come together, then we have a misunderstanding, and we're trying to come to a consensus, but we're traveling different directions. And so I appreciate you pointing that out. And I love that you used the example of Christ being nice and also being good. In that respect, you're absolutely right. We can be nice because we want to appear nice.
Mm, yes.
Okay, and we can talk a lot about ego,
Yes.
and ego is it's a great thing. You've got to have it. Okay, but what we've got to do is we've got to point it the right direction. Okay, and so you're saying of I need to be nice because I want to look good to others. Boy, that's a reality check right there. Just bam. Who am I doing this for?
Exactly.
Okay. And we talk about these definitions, and it reminded me of our discussion a couple of weeks ago. This wasn't on video, but we discussed C.S. Lewis and how we have the understanding of what bad looks like because we know bad, we can know good. And he uses the analogy of we can't determine what a straight line is unless we know what a crooked line looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so we know what nice looks like, and we know what good looks like, and they can look a lot similar.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen an optical illusion where everything looks crooked and the lines look all jumbled, but you hold a ruler up to one of the lines and it's straight?
Yes.
Okay. And so sometimes I think it gets a little mixed up in there, nice and good. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, and so that vision of I'm being a nice guy. Okay. Well, let's kind of boil the water out of this. Let's look behind
Yeah.
the curtain and see what the driver of that is. And so that's one of my notes here is what's the intention? Is it to
Mm,
look good, or is it just to be a good guy because you're a good guy and your standards just determine that you're supposed to do that?
yeah.
And in your example of Christ, his intention was always, 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 always pure.
Yeah.
Now it looked like he was just an awful person when he walked into the temple grounds there and said, "You know what? I'm cleaning up my father's space here. You guys are out." And he was pretty direct about it.
Yes.
I don't know if he used the whip. We don't know, but we do know
Yeah.
that he walked
That's
in
fair.
there with one.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the show, the Chosen show where he did.
Yeah, well, he walked in there, but the intention was is that he was going to clean up the space to what it should be for his father. It wasn't for him. It wasn't to look good. It wasn't. There was zero ego. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he had an ego, but that ego is tied to the identity that he held as I'm God's son, and I'm going to go in and clean this up for my father,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. That's precisely uh, the point that we're trying to make,
Exactly.
that I'm learning about here in kind of a fresh way, is that we are very easily deceived in that, well, I'm such a nice guy, how can you not agree with me, or how can you not like me or take my side, or however that is, because I'm doing all of these nice things. Well, um,
What's the intention?
intention. I mean, if you're really doing it to feed your ego, which of course we know our ego is enormous. It's
We all
also
do it.
very fragile. It's empty, always desiring to be filled, and it's hurting. It's sore, and that's why we give it so much attention, because that's how our ego behaves. And if this kind of behavior is a means to feed that, then that is the wrong intention, and eventually it's going to backfire. So then, um, to combat that, the idea that I'm processing is the focus then on being good. So then, what does good look like if in some cases that means not being nice?
Well, there again, what's the intention? And it goes back to there's a set standard. Okay.
Mm, right, yes.
You know, in the case of your story with Jesus, there was a set standard of what was qualified to be in the temple, and people had violated that, and so it needed to be cleaned up.
Right.
Okay, and so
Yep.
you might say that it was standard based instead of just a reaction base.
Mm, I like that. Yeah.
Does that make
Yep.
sense? Okay,
Yep. That works.
so it was a set of standards that governed what he did. It wasn't just this, knee jerk reaction to, man, I don't like these guys.
Mm, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it was thought through. He probably had experienced it several times, and he may have even gone there and said, "Hey, you guys are doing this wrong," and then they show up again and do it next week.
Mm,
And you know, I don't know. We don't know the background of that. But when he walked in there this time, it was all standard based. It wasn't ego driven.
yeah.
It wasn't a knee jerk reaction to something somebody said. It was, okay, we're going to clean this up because you're violating the standards
Yeah.
of that sacred place.
Yeah. So this is making me think of um, some key questions that we ought to be asking ourselves. And here is the exercise of mental fitness, right? Is asking ourselves some questions about our true motivations for what we're doing. Now, what I don't mean is that we have to psychoanalyze every word and everything that we're trying to do. Maybe more so at first, until we can build some history and momentum and habit toward right thinking in this area. And that's kind of, preaching to myself here a little bit, but just to consider why why am I um, doing this thing, or why do I think this is a good idea? Am I doing it actually for the other person and for their benefit and well-being entirely, or is there something in there that's trying to feed me in this ego? um, and then to be careful not to deceive yourself in that, because I do that. I think it's easy. And so I guess two things: I'm asking myself the question, but I'm also wondering if you're tracking with me, if there's another way to help make sure that we're not deceiving ourselves in justifying it.
it comes back to that intention.
Yeah.
It really comes back to the intention. The other thing that I wrote this down, it's identity, it's who we are, and we need to support that rather than live for others.
Mm,
We need to decide what our identity is and live to that rather than living for others.
mm,
I want you to think about that because you abdicate your identity when you live for others and you
that's right.
retain it when you live for yourself.
Mm, yeah. I think again, some clarification of terms is necessary then, because at face value, to say that you're living for yourself is also very dangerous,
Uh, Right,
right?
right. No, you have to be very careful crafting what that identity is, and it has to fall
Yes.
within standards. Okay,
Yes.
here again, it's got to be foundational to truth, um,
Yeah.
yeah, and not some made up truth. There's a
Mhm.
phrase running around here. You got to live your truth, and
Right.
oh man,
Yeah.
you want to spin me up? Just tell me that, and yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
truth stands on its own. It's not something I determine in my head to fit what I want in life.
Yeah.
I may want to fly and I may want to defy gravity, but I will never, ever, even as hard as I argue and as hard as I think I can defy gravity, I never will unless I live I have to live those laws. I can
Mhm.
fly. I can get in an airplane, but I've got to live all the laws of flight to defy gravity. Okay, just me making a decision and living my truth doesn't change it. Wow, I got on my soapbox there and I forgot what I was talking about. But anyway, um, you've got to be sincere about your identity and base it on foundational truth-based standards.
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and then just live true to that.
Yeah. So a bit of a trick question then. Uh, Assuming there is such a thing, where do you find that?
Mm. What's the source of truth? Pilate asked that of Jesus.
Yeah.
What is truth?
Yeah.
I have
Well,
I have an answer for you, but it would be very, very long.
I'm kind of a simpleton, um, but I have great confidence that it's basically all right here.
Yep, yep. Where's the source of truth?
Yeah.
It's right there.
Um, the Holy Bible. I mean, you don't have to agree that that's the case, but you also don't have to agree that there's gravity, but it just is.
It just is.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Um,
what's so cool is we have someone that's benevolent enough to let us make our own choice and to find truth.
yeah. Yeah.
We can choose not to
Mhm.
find it, and he allows us to do that. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
Because that
That's
means
that's a difference between nice and good right there.
it really
Because
is.
if he was only nice, then he would just basically make us robots and we
Well,
would
he
always
would
be
let us he
perfectly
would let us
compliant.
live our truth.
Yeah. Yeah. That or he would make us perfectly compliant without choice, and everything would be just, perfect like a machine.
Yep, we'd be robots
Um,
to your point.
yeah. But we also know that that's not how it works,
No,
because you said earlier that um, evil or bad things or wrong is what helps us to know what is good, where the straight line is. And so there has to be a standard. And I believe that we have that standard. and that is the place from which we can derive our proper identity, which we have talked about in the past. You can go see the episodes about identity. Um,
We
but
may need to talk about it again.
yeah, yeah,
You've probably grown up since then, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's a recurring theme of mental fitness to make sure that we're aligned with the truth regarding our proper identity, and that is how we can keep ourselves from uh, deception, even self-deception about motives for why we're doing what we're doing. Um, so I hope that's helpful. It is to me to spit it out again and in a different way. Um, just to ask those simple questions, why am I doing this? To who is benefiting, and what is the ultimate goal here? Um, if it's more about me than somebody else, then be careful of puffing up my chest about doing good works.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me you made me remember a Latin phrase. It's called cui bono.
Oh, nice. I like the sound of that.
Cui bono means who benefits.
Okay.
And if you're doing what you're doing to benefit you, it's probably a time to just take a reflection and check yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for the benefit of someone else, um, that
Mm,
that holds with truth. And if you're doing it for the benefit of the glory of a creator or the one that made you or a higher power, in my case, it would be God, um,
yeah.
you're okay.
Yeah.
You're on good ground. And so, thank you for reminding me of cui bono. I'd
Yes.
forgotten that phrase.
I
Who
like that.
who benefits? Cui bono.
Yes. Man, that's good.
There's your Latin for today.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So since we have established that in some way that that there is truth, we know where to find it. It's up to us to choose it, um, and we can make our choices in how we believe and behave according to that. Um, and then our good works are meant for somebody else first before ourselves. We also know, let's not mistake that we always benefit when we're doing something for someone else. That's
Always,
also how it works.
always.
And so the one other thing I don't want to miss, it's in I'm just going to read it so that I don't misquote, but in Matthew 5,
The Beatitudes.
uh, it says, he's talking about you are salt and light. And he says, in the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. So this verse is directly talking about our subject here, in that the purpose of our good deeds is so that the recipient would praise God, not praise me.
Us. Yep.
And so if my intention, as you said earlier, is focused on um,
Pointing
our
people to God.
creator,
Yeah, pointing people to God.
we want people to think highly of God,
Hmm.
not highly of me. And I just thought that's the ticket right there.
Yeah.
That's a key way for somebody like me to help overcome this um, performance mentality where I feel like my value has to come from what other people would think, which is entirely selfish because I'm only just trying to feed myself in doing good things.
Yeah.
So yeah, let my any goodness that would come from anything that I do help people to see and praise God. that's a shift in thinking that I believe would be very healthy.
For all of us. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay, so the guy that cut you off in traffic today, just bless him and let him go and wish him well.
that's right. Yes. I usually say something like, boy, that guy must be really important.
Our daughter, she got to the point that she would say, they must make really good brownies. And so it's kind of a running joke around here. Got cut.
That's
That guy
good.
must make really good brownies.
Yeah.
But you know what? We don't know what's going on in the head of the other person. I mean, they may
Right.
be headed to an emergency. They may be trying to save their job. They may, yeah, and maybe they have a huge ego and they've got to get in front of you just out of spite. Who cares? I mean, it's just a second of, yeah,
Yeah.
irritation. Give them a blessing, let them go. And I'm
Yeah.
speaking mainly to myself because
Yeah.
that's not my my initial. I have
Uh,
to catch myself. It's like, oh, make
yeah.
good brownies.
Isn't it so funny um how tough and angry we can get when we're in our little protected
In our little
vehicle.
shell.
Nobody can know. It's the same with the internet and social media. It's like, man, people are so brave and
Yeah,
you know
no,
confident in what they think there, but
no, we got to bless them and let it go
yeah.
because all it does is tear us down. So
Yeah. Well, shoot. So I don't know. Did we make any sense
I
of
don't know.
nice
What?
versus good? I don't know.
Leave it in the comments below if we made sense.
Yeah.
If not, we'll try
They
again.
they must go together, but there is a difference. And my big takeaway is that I don't want to be known as just the nice guy because I think I'm leaving something on the table if I'm only pursuing being the nice guy. I want to be good. And as we have defined good, it's to a standard and it's pointing people to the standard, not to me. That's part of what being good
Yeah.
is. And sometimes that's going to come across as not being very nice.
Well, and if we're trying to be good, it doesn't matter what other people think.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. The last thing I just thought of that I want to make sure I say is that a piece of compassion or a piece of truly loving another person at some point will require you to not be very nice, but it does require you to be good.
And truthful.
Yeah. So again, the always being the nice guy is not the way to win. And I've operated that way for a long time, and I'm trying to work through that. But um, compassion is not just always laying yourself down. Sometimes it's standing up and calling truth and loving people through some confrontation, perhaps, always with the intent of their benefit. So
Of a good
anyway,
outcome.
I hope
Absolutely.
something makes sense there because
Yeah.
it sure helps me.
Yeah. Nope, that's good stuff. All right, Chad.
All
Looking
right.
forward to next week.
Yeah. All right.
Please have fun mowing your lawn.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
have a great weekend. We'll see you.
All right. You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mental Fitness Unscripted podcast. Now go take some action because we know that information alone doesn't change you, but taking even the smallest action in the right direction does. Also, subscribe and comment so more people can find the podcast and be encouraged. If you're ready to take your mental fitness to the next level and you'd like more support, check out teamquadzilla.com for our resources that will help you accelerate your journey. Until next time, remember, Healthy living starts between your ears.